Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock. That's how,
I know, I said
how
that
it's
weird.
pronounced now.
Ben Matlock.
Matlock.
It's French.
It's, I guess.
It stands for Matlock.
It damn sure isn't English anymore. Yeah, welcome to the show. We're here again. We keep going. This
16 weeks in a row, baby.
16 strong. And now, not strong. That's actually a bad adjective to describe this show at this point. 16 here.
You've got like... It's like a train that keeps chugging away, but not really fast. We keep rolling down the track.
It's a train that, like, luckily we hit a downhill when the engine died, so it's still going. But it's definitely we need to pick this shit up.
So for first-time listeners, this show's about terrible analogies that we drag on for way too long.
Right. I'm gonna have to. I have to make a note to edit this shit. If you haven't listened to the show before, every week me and Steve get together and tell each other random shit from the internet we found. Sometimes from the internet, sometimes from real books. It could be fact, fiction, history, lore, whatever. There's no real rules. There's no real structure. Yeah, well, I guess there's a structure. I usually go first. I guess I just decided that one day.
I like that setup too, because if I ever can actually build up like a stable of stories, like a bunch of them that are ready, I can just wait to see how good yours is, and then be like, "Fuck! Well, I need to up my game this week."
I gotta go through my files. Yeah, don't make files for this show. This week, we talked about some shit last week. It doesn't matter because this week's completely different.
Completely.
But in episode 2, I talked about a pirate. And I said that pirates would be a reoccurring thing on this show. And it only took, 15 or 14 more episodes.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked. I really thought at that point that the show was going to turn into the Pirate Podcast.
It would be a ghost show, and then a pirate show, and then a ghost show, and then a ghost pirate show. I'm really proud of how I've held off. The sad truth is, like, there are really good pirate stories out there, but they're kind of hard to dig into. A lot of pirate stuff is just obvious, like, hey, you know who got scurvy? Like, fucking all of them. But we're going to talk about Stede Bonnet today, the gentleman pirate, he was called.
Nice.
Stede Bonnet, and you and me both played Assassin's Creed 4. He's in that game, but I don't remember if he does anything.
Yeah, I don't remember him from it particularly. But in fairness, I don't remember like anything about the plot of that game.
I was just going to say, if you remember the story to that game, then you didn't play that game right. So, more than anything, Stede Bonnet is a man who would become known for having the most fucking weird, random, extreme midlife crisis you could think of in the early 1700s. Because in every way you could imagine, he was successful. Like, he had a wife, children, land, and a massive fortune from a sugar plantation in Barbados. And then just randomly, one day he decided he wanted to be a pirate. And
my guess is that it wasn't random. He probably, since he was a little kid, wanted to be, and finally he's like, fuck it, there's nothing holding me back anymore.
Well, pirates, were a relatively recent thing at this point, at least as far as, like, the
golden age,
the glamour of it. It was kind of like the old West, cowboys and bandits and shit. Like how there was a whole appeal to it, and I guess he saw that, and so he started off by buying his own boat, which.
Well, that's a good start.
Yeah. If you would think, like, the first thing you would think about pirates is they stole their boats usually because they're pirates. And Stede, I guess, said, well, that seems like a lot of trouble. I have all this money. Why don't I just legally purchase my boat? It's like, well, then you're not a pirate. You're just a guy who wants a boat.
Oh, but he whittled him down on the price. Ha ha.
I stole some toothpaste while they were busy ringing up the other transactions.
The pin was on a chain, but I broke the chain and kept the pin.
So, that's just kind of the early example of, like, what kind of guy you're dealing with Stede. Where he's like, I'm going to go be a pirate. Damn it, how do I be a pirate? So, like, Stede didn't know anything about seafaring. He had only sailed as a passenger in his entire life. And he had no grievance against the establishment. Like, he was fucking rich. The system worked for him. So it's like, it was a really random, like, I'm going to be a pirate. It's like, why? You have everything, dude. You
said he was married. I want to know how the conversation with his wife went.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Like, there's not really a clear answer of why he went into piracy, but one of the, like, big, you can only really call it a myth because, like I said, nobody really knows, but they were saying it was, like, marital troubles. Like, so, like, he didn't like his wife, and so he just decided, like, you know what, I would like being on a ship with 70 pirates. And
you would think if you were rich and successful and you didn't like your wife, you'd send her to sea instead. Like,
honey, I'm paying to make you a pirate. But it was weird. Like, he was educated before he had his sugar plantation. He had a successful army career where he achieved the rank of major. And he was, like, after he retired, he raised his family for, like, a decade. But, like I said, some people say it was due to marital frustrations, but it's such a drastic lifestyle change that you have, like, I have a hard time believing that it was just like, oh, my wife's nagging me, I'm going to go completely uphaul my life.
I think more realistically, I could picture, like, he probably had this idea of pirates. We all have the thing that we'd love to do, that we're like, oh man, if I could just drop everything and go become a mountain climber.
I mean, it's 2018. I want to drop everything and be a pirate.
Well, true. And that's, so if you add that to the fact that home life, even in a good marriage with kids, it's tough. I mean, you're not. So I could, and maybe it's more complex than just like, oh, I don't like my wife. It was more like, I'm bored with my life.
Yeah, that's why, it's called, like, everything I read about it, like, they call it an extreme midlife crisis. Like, it's a real, like, kind of Breaking Bad thing you're dealing with Stede, except not nearly as competent. And that's saying something if you've watched that show at all. He did suffer the loss of a child, and there is suspicions that there were more financial issues than were kind of apparent. That, like, he may have lost a good chunk of his fortune due to, like, a storm or something fucking up all of his sugar.
I was hoping you meant, like, he just literally lost it. Like, where did I put that $1 billion? Fuck.
He got drunk one night and did, like, the X marks the spot thing, but didn't put it on a map. No, but like I said, there's no real idea what his actual motivations are. All we do know is that once he bought his ship, he went whole hog into piracy. He armed it with 10 cannons, hired a crew of 70, and named the sloop Revenge.
Oh, that's a good name for a pirate ship.
It is. But that's why there were many pirate ships at that time named Revenge.
Well, like, that's why I like, at least it was Blackbeard's was the Queen Anne's Revenge, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, like, at least that gives it some context. It's like, whose revenge is it?
Yeah, there were a lot of ships called Revenge, and Bonnet's was especially funny because, like, he didn't, like I said, he didn't have any vendettas, so it was mostly just for this image of the menacing pirate.
He just assumed at some point down the road he was going to make a nemesis.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know what he assumed, but he threw up a Jolly Roger flag and sailed for Virginia, where they raided commercial vessels and did pretty well, because, like, for all of his bumbling inexperience at sea, Bonnet actually did hire a really experienced pirate crew, and through they captured several ships.
And you did say that he was a major. That's important, knowing how to direct men in like a almost a military-esque setting. Now, I know pirate life was a little different, and I don't want to go into that. I'm sure you're familiar with it because I know you love the subject. But it's still important that you have that, like, leadership ability.
Yeah, and I wish I could, like, say you're right, but in Bonnet's case, not having experience at sea, you know, so, like, you're good at giving orders, but you don't actually know what you're doing when you're navigating the water or whatever. He was really coasting on his team. It's kind of like in sports, if, like, a team makes the playoffs, but the coach is just a fucking imbecile.
The Cavaliers.
So he was kind of dealing with that, but they were doing really well in Virginia, and in these early successes, he set sail for Honduras to spend their fortune, and that's where Bonnet would meet Blackbeard.
Oh, cool. To become good friends, huh?
Well, Bonnet sure thought so. Bonnet was thrilled to meet this living pirate legend, and the two agreed to work together. Blackbeard realized very quickly that he was dealing with an amateur and a buffoon, and proceeded to begin the easiest ship capturing of his life. He sent his first mate over to the Revenge and explained to Bonnet that Bonnet would be better off relaxing aboard the bigger ship without having to command his own. This would basically made, like, the crew was on the Revenge was easily just like, yeah, please, like, new leadership, awesome. A pirate actually knowing what we're doing.
Well, right. I mean, that's like you're working at some shitty local software company, and then, like, Bill Gates comes along. And it's like,
right.
You can see him taking over your company, but you're like, yeah, I'd rather work for this guy.
Yeah, totally. And it was a very easy transition. And this basically made Bonnet Blackbeard's prisoner. Bonnet wasn't, like, he was a fool, but he wasn't so dumb that he didn't realize, like, what had just happened. But he really couldn't do much about it.
Right. I mean, if you complain, they just kill you.
Right. So he had to kind of, like, it was all under this pretense of, like, he was a guest on Blackbeard's ship. But really he was, you know, he was trapped. He would just spend his days kind of walking around the ship in his morning gown, tending to his personal library. So, like, it was all under this pretense of, like, yeah, just relax. But it's like, actually, we took all of your shit.
Right.
During a siege Blackbeard had started in Charleston, South Carolina, Blackbeard told Bonnet he was going to take a pardon, and suggested Bonnet do the same. Bonnet, not having a ship and really not having that much pride left, agreed. Bonnet and some of his crew went to Bath, North Carolina to receive their pardons, and Bonnet learned that France and England had declared war on Spain. So Bonnet decided that this would be a good opportunity, and he would become a legal privateer against Spain in the new conflict. Unfortunately, this pardon idea was just another trick by Blackbeard. Promising he would return the Revenge to Stede, Blackbeard actually swiped all the plunder off of it and marooned 25 of the crew on an island. He did technically leave the ship, but he took basically everything of value from it, and Bonnet was pissed. He set sail and picked up his men and resumed his piracy life with the goal of hunting Blackbeard down.
It's a good goal, except for it seems you're outclassed there by a little bit.
Right. So, unfortunately, Blackbeard, being an actually experienced captain with a huge head start, Bonnet would never find him again. But his experiences with Blackbeard did actually kind of teach him the true nature of the pirate life, and Bonnet actually kind of shifted from a buffoon to, like, a real asshole. Like, he would abuse his crew, kill prisoners, and threaten civilians, and, like, he was finally finding pirate success. Just, you know, he was like, oh, you have to be a piece of shit to be a pirate. I get it now. Like, what the fuck did you think they were doing when you bought your ship?
And I wonder if he actually, like, if that clicked, or if it was just, like, he broke because he was pissed. He was just like, fuck everybody. Like, I could see being mean to your crew, because his crew sounds like they sold him out pretty easily, and he realized that there's no loyalty there whatsoever.
Yeah, and you got left on an island once you were useless to Blackbeard, so... But yeah, he was finding success, and it was all kind of centered around Virginia again. So it came to some shock to him when a Colonel William Rhett, under orders from the governor of South Carolina, led 2 ships in a full-fledged pirate hunt. this pirate fleet or pirate hunting fleet was looking for a Charles Vane, another notorious pirate. But instead they found Stede Bonnet in his new ship, the Royal James, with 2 side vessels. After some chasing, Bonnet got cornered in the mouth of the Cape Fear River. After a violent firefight where Bonnet declared he would blow himself up and the ship before he would surrender, his men overruled him and gave themselves up.
Yeah, we won't surrender. We're gonna blow ourselves up if we have to. And the guys are like,
and the guys are like, no, we totally surrender. What? Like, you think we're gonna blow ourselves up for you, you dipshit? So even though he was getting a reputation, he still didn't quite have, that kind of loyalty.
Oh, he was, yeah. I give him credit. He's trying. Like, that's about the most like badass, like, bad guy thing you can say is, fuck you, you're not taking me alive. And then the crew is just like,
yeah, and they just walk away. It's like, wait, guys, I need help with the gunpowder. So they gave themselves up. Bonnet got arrested, of course, and while in custody, he tried to use kind of his upper class background to his advantage, and like in his appeals to the governor for mercy. He would blame everything basically he ever did on Blackbeard, which you could imagine a lot of pirates probably did.
Probably.
that would have been my excuse. Like, no, Blackbeard made me do it. Most of his men got hanged, but his trial actually dragged on for a really long time. And it's kind of interesting, like, the transcript of his trial is one of the more thorough historical records we have about Bonnet and Blackbeard himself, because, Blackbeard's a lot of kind of myth and legend to us. And so a lot of the details of him actually come from Bonnet just trying to place a lot of blame for everything he did on this fucking, mythical captain. Sadly for Stede, there was no way his pursuit of piracy would be ignored. The judge gave a lengthy speech grilling Bonnet on the morality of what he's done, pointing out that unlike many who engaged in piracy, circumstances didn't drive him to this. He chose the life knowing full well what pirates were, when he had perfectly legal and moral alternatives. He was hanged at White Point, Charleston in November 1718. So, like, you have to think, like, maybe that was what Stede wanted, though, in that kind of fucked up Breaking Bad sort of way, where it was just like, I don't give a shit of, like, I don't want to die, and that was probably why he was trying to, weasel out of it and save his skin, but, I think in the long run, he kind of, like, he was okay with the idea of dying rather than just that complacency.
Yeah. Well, and I think it sounds like he would have been okay with the idea of, like you said, he obviously didn't want to die. I don't think too many people in those situations want to die, but he also, like, probably felt like, yeah, I'm this makes me a legit pirate. Like, I was a notorious outlaw, just like I wanted to be.
And you have to imagine, like, because, like, he got that pardon or whatever, and then he was just like, one wrong happens to him, and he's, like, right back in it. Like, he jumped right back into that life. So you have to think, like, even if he somehow by a miracle got out of this situation and didn't get hanged, he would be right back to, going about that life. Like, this was a guy who just, in some way, did snap. Like, he wanted to, like, just go into, like, a fucking horrible criminal trade.
Right. I'm kind of surprised. Like, you'd almost think that if you got the pardon and got a ship back and were that pissed at Blackbeard, you could get, like, an actual commission, be like, I'm fucking hunting Blackbeard down. Like, pretty much every nation, I think, at the time would have paid him to do that, or at least supported him.
I mean, at that point, it would be like, what would they... Yeah, I doubt he would have been the first person to say, like, hey, I'll hunt down Blackbeard for you, and he definitely would be the least qualified. It's like, why would you send Steve Bonnet to, like, hunt down Blackbeard when his only familiarity with Blackbeard is getting fucking screwed twice by him?
I'm curious, like, with the pirate hunting ships, when they, like, accidentally stumbled upon him, like, was he inept enough to be, like, sailing around with the Jolly Roger up? Because that's really not what you were supposed to do.
I think he probably, from the sounds of it, he was pretty gung-ho about that Jolly Roger flag. I doubt it was what like tipped them off that there were pirates. They probably got some tip that there were pirates in an area, and then like they thought like, oh, that must be Charles Vane, and like turns out it's Steve Bonnet, and
hey, pirate's a pirate,
and yeah, and like Colonel William Red is probably just like, well, fuck, that's not who I wanted. Well, you're under arrest. Yeah, there's not a very long story to Stede, but I always find it kind of interesting when like somebody who just doesn't have any motivation to become a criminal does it anyway, like any apparent motivation, and it's just for like that rush.
It's interesting because I was just reading about really it was a search for a pirate ship, modern day, real life story, but it was about these guys that found one of the only times that they've ever found an actual sunken pirate ship, because they're you hear about all these finding sunken treasures, and most of the time that those are the like merchant galleys that had were carrying treasure, but they weren't pirate ships. For the amount of shipwrecks in the sea, being able to find one and be able to 100% verify that it was a pirate ship that sunk is there's just not that many of them that you'll ever be able to find. But anyway, the one that they found was, and shit, now I forget his first name. It might have been Steve as well, but it was Bannister. Kind of same deal, where he had a legitimate job and legitimate success and just decided to become a pirate.
Yeah, and it's interesting for Stede because like he's mostly known for his early foolishness and stuff, like that's the big part of his legend, but he is like cemented up there with like some of the most famous pirates. In some cases that's just because you interact with Blackbeard, you kind of get locked into that tale, but I did think it was kind of interesting that, in some way, like, if ego was the motivation, then, like, it definitely got satisfied, because, centuries later, we're talking about him on this acclaimed podcast.
It was Joseph Bannister, by the way, is the one I was reading about.
Joey Bannister, my dog.
Once you get into the book I was reading, they just refer to him as the Pirate Bannister. I couldn't remember what his first name was.
What's up, J-Ban? Shout out to J-Ban. Wherever he is. But so yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's funny too though, because when you look at a story like that and you see that he kind of got taken by Blackbeard, then got out, and then got caught, sounds like relatively quickly, but still for a pirate that's successful. I mean, pirates didn't have a long shelf life. Like,
yeah, the whole philosophy of a pirate's life was like a short life, but like a merry one. Right. And merry meant you raped and robbed and murdered and
spent all your money at Port Royale.
Santa Claus had a very different definition of merry.
That was one of the things that I learned reading this book, because you always think sunken pirate ship and you think treasure. And they said most of the time, even the sunken pirate ships, even if you can find them, aren't going to have treasure on them, because the first thing they did after they stole this money was go spend all the money, because they knew that they probably wouldn't be around long anyway, so they're going to live it up. They weren't
Steve Bonnet probably tried offering people retirement packages and shit, and they were like, "What the fuck?"
Well, interesting story, and like I said, I'm surprised we went this many weeks without another pirate story, but
yeah,
I don't, my love of pirates doesn't go quite as deep as yours, but it's up there. I like I like seafaring, and I like that kind of stuff, and I like history, and pirates are certainly a cool part of that. Well, cool's the wrong word.
Like we said, episode 2, they're fucked up. When I say I love pirates, I love the history of them. They were villains in damn near every way. Like, they weren't.
You read about them and some of the things that they did to people. It's
Jack Sparrow's a fucking cartoon character. People
right.
I want the rated R Pirates of the Caribbean, and it would just be Johnny Depp getting hung.
this isn't my story, but I wanted to write this down because it's a random fact that I found out this week. Actually, speaking of Johnny Depp, kind of, that probably everybody else in the world already knew, but I thought it was interesting. But I was actually watching a old Nova, or actually no, brand new Nova, PBS Nova episode on knight's armor, like making a full body, like the suits of armor that we picture.
The ones we wear for this show every week.
The audience can hear, like, if you're dressed, if I'm sitting here in my underwear, I'm going to sound less professional than if I'm sitting here in a suit of armor. But anyway, at one point they were talking about they had to use mercury in order to gild the gold on this armor. And they mentioned that hatters used to use a lot of mercury when working with felt, when they were making hats. And of course, mercury is toxic. And one of the symptoms of mercury poisoning is that, much like lead, it affects your mental state. And that's where the phrase "mad as a hatter" comes from. I had no idea that was an actual thing. I always assumed it came from Alice in Wonderland.
I always assumed that you kept psychedelic mushrooms in your big hat.
Yeah.
And then you ate them, and then, you're mad as a hatter. Yeah.
So that's just a random fact, but and it's funny. It's one of the, it's a few times that I learned this and I was so excited, and I told my wife, I'm like, hey, did you know where that? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. I didn't know that off the top of my head. It does sound like something I've heard before, but I probably dismissed it, and I was just like, no, it's from Alice in Wonderland, you dipshits.
Now, I don't know what the hell mercury has to do with working with felt, but
anywho,
Yang Kyung-jung was a Korean soldier who, during World War II,
why do you do this to yourself? Like
Kyung-jung? I can't help it. I don't pick these names.
But you could change the names, and I would have no idea. Like
Yanko.
William Scott.
He was a Korean soldier who, during World War II, was forced to fight for the Japanese. They conscripted him into their army, and they sent him off to fight the Soviet army, where he was eventually captured and forced to fight for the Soviets, who sent him to the German front. The Nazis captured Yang and forced him to fight for the German army, who sent him to Normandy. There he was captured by the U.S. Army.
Who sent him to fight the devil? Like, how good of a fucking soldier does he have to be to where these guys are all like, yeah, free agent, awesome. Right.
See, that's what I found Yang on a list of world's most unlucky people. But given that each time that he was captured, he was kept alive, and he was sent back to the battle front, but they didn't kill him or put him in prison. During World War II, I'd consider that lucky, probably more than unlucky.
I would not, because by the time I've been traded to my third team, I probably want to retire from whatever the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah, and they didn't say the U.S. when they captured him didn't say they sent him to fight for there, so they probably ended up being treated like shit in some U.S. Army camp, but whatever. But I thought that was interesting. I also found a man that was struck twice by lightning, and then after he died, his headstone was struck by lightning. So
good on him.
That's something.
That always terrified me, irrationally. Just anytime, I love storms and stuff, but the idea of just I believe I could be that unlucky one day.
Yeah, and then once it happens, once you hear these kind of stories, we're like, well, fuck, now it's going to follow me around.
It's and I have electrocuted myself. It was doing dumb shit, but just that minor shock versus God's wrath, that's very frightening.
I did also find a story of a man that was struck by lightning 7 times, although I've heard about him before, so I didn't follow that link.
Are we going for high scores here? What game is this?
Again, these are all from a list of the world's unluckiest people. From what I remember about the guy that was struck 7 times, though, he's not exactly gone out of his way to avoid it. I think 2 or 3 times he was out fishing when a storm blew up. It's well, you'd think after the first fucking time, any sign of
just
storm,
don't go fishing. Fuck it. You cut the. You get struck by lightning even one time, you cut out whatever you were doing from your life entirely.
Sure. Stay inside in a concrete building. It's
like I'm never eating lunch again because I got fucking zapped, man.
Then there's Anne Hodges, who was taking a nap on her couch when she was struck on the hip by a meteorite, becoming the only documented case of a person being hit by a meteorite in all of recorded human history. Although, again, she lived, so...
I feel like that's on you a little bit. That means you watched it come toward you.
She was sleeping on her couch, crashed through her roof.
Yeah, you gotta have that animal instinct. I would have woken up.
You hear it coming. Yeah, spidey senses. But I found like most of the people on this list I was reading, they're like, oh, these unlucky people. It's like, but they survived it all. Like, they're kind of lucky too.
But sometimes death is better. Like
that's true.
Sometimes like being unlucky is like having to live with like, yeah, I got hit by a fucking meteorite. It's like, and I didn't get superpowers from it. It's bullshit.
Yeah. One of the interesting ones, considering our topic a couple weeks ago, there was a Raymond A. I'm just going to call him Raymond because you thought that last name was bad. It's like Arda Gravy. It's whatever.
I love Arda Gravy.
For years after Raymond's boat caught fire and sank, he refused to go aboard another ship, despite coming from a family that had a long tradition of like making a living at sea. I think they were fishermen. 41 years after the boat sank, he finally decided to give boats another shot, and he booked a trip on the Titanic.
God damn. That's not... Everyone
That's
on
unlucky.
That fucking boat was unlucky, dude.
Right.
Like,
because I think everybody had a story like that. And unlike Violet Jessup from a few weeks ago, he was not unsinkable and did not survive the Titanic.
You gotta stick to your guns, man. He was breaking the family cycle.
And that's what sucks when you have something like that, where something's happened to you that it wasn't like it was an irrational fear of boats. He was on a boat that fucking caught fire and sank, and he almost drowned.
Yeah,
and he didn't.
He's
like, I'm done with
two favorite life-threatening factors: fire and water, into one horrible.
And everybody for 41 years was like, come on, Ray, what's the chances of that happening again? Boats are great. And he, for 41 years, never went on a boat at all. Not even like a little paddle boat in the park. And then he's like, okay, I need to get over this. One Titanic ticket, please. And he bought it because it was being dubbed like the world's first unsinkable ship.
But that's you being dumb then a little bit, because it's like, you should be suspicious of that. You want the like ship, like the rickety fucking crab boat where the captain's like, oh, this could definitely sink if I'm not on my shit. Because then that guy will never let it sink.
Right. So there's all these people, and then there's Jeanne Rogers. Jeannie's run of bad luck is pretty epic, and like all my favorite stories, it begins at sea. When she was 18 years old, she was on a cruise while trying to take a picture. I don't know if she was taking the picture or posing. She slipped and fell overboard. Her
onto
friend
the Titanic.
Right. And then sank to death. I like that. That's what I want in my obit if I ever drown, is that he sank to death. But so she fell overboard. Her friend was there and saw the whole thing happen, so she ran to get help. But when she tried to run to get help, she slipped and knocked herself out cold. So by the time she finally regained consciousness, she was able to get the boat to turn around and go back. And fortunately, Jeannie had a life jacket with her, which helped her stay afloat in the cold waters. And the boat actually found her. Every story I read made it seem like, well, yeah, they turned around and got her. But if you know anything about being lost at sea, the chances of finding a fucking person bobbing along in the sea,
I was gonna say, it sounds like it's the one time I'll go with you, kind of how you think, where it's what would be really unlucky? Just drowning in the fucking ocean. Being found in the ocean actually sounds pretty fortunate.
Yeah, the unlucky part of that was her idiot friend slipping and knocking herself out. So delaying the amount of time it took to
how
go back
fucking
and get
mad
her.
I would be if I fell in the water and you just watch your friend fucking bumble and trip and fall, and you're just rocking back and forth in the ocean. Well, fuck.
I hope they're dead.
The one person, you better have cracked your fucking skull. I'm dying here.
Because it's required to happen to unlucky people, Jeanne was also struck by lightning. The bolt knocked her out of her shoes and blew a quarter-sized hole in her ankle.
Is it like the same while she was in the water?
No.
Different
This was later.
I was going to say, if this all happens in a day...
That would be pretty awesome. But it blew her shoes off. You know, you've heard stories like that where if somebody gets hit by a car or lightning or whatever, so it much force, it's like your shoes just come off. Blew a hole in her ankle. It melted her pantyhose to her legs and damaged the nerves in her feet so bad that she couldn't bear to wear shoes for a while. I mean, it sounds like she must have got over that part, because the rest of her story sounds like it happened while she was in shoes. But
we can only hope.
Yeah, so after that happened and she recovered, I think it said it was like 2 or 3 years later, she was struck by lightning again. This time through a metal bracelet she was wearing.
Fucking the Grim Reaper's just like, what the fuck? Like, I tried to kill you 3 years ago.
Well, what happens is he keeps trying to kill her, and then like he gets a call from his mom, and he's like, "Fuck, yes, mom, I'm working, mom. I can't talk right now,
it's
mom."
the same girl. She just.
And then by the time he gets off the phone with his mom, she's back alive. He's like, "Damn it,
what the fuck."
But by all accounts, the second strike wasn't nearly as bad as the first, so I guess that's
what they say.
She had practice. She knew how to take a hit now. She's been mugged. Once while she was out riding horseback, she was shot at, but there was no like further explanation there. So,
all right, yeah. So, so even death gave up and hired hitmen.
But they hired that guy from a couple episodes back that worked for that loan shark company.
Yeah,
they, like subcontracted it out to just average Joes that suck at killing.
Well, to be fair, she was supposed to be half dead anyway, so you went cheap again.
That's true. Yeah, you're like, how hard could this be? Well, apparently, pretty difficult.
Fucking unstoppable force here.
Her husband came home drunk one night and tried to strangle her to death, but I'd consider that less bad luck than him just being a shitty person.
It's bad luck that her, after all this shit, her environment still like had men that were fucking monsters.
Right. And then there was also no other mention of him. Like, they hadn't mentioned that she had gotten married, because I wasn't reading a biography. But then she's like, oh yeah, they're like, yeah, her husband was drunk and he came home and tried to strangle her to death. Like, that's a thing that happens. And I assume they like got divorced, I hope.
But no, actually, he got struck by the lightning that was meant to hit her, killed him on the spot.
And she survived.
And Death's like, what the fuck?
Although it melted her glasses to her nose or something. I don't know. But probably the funniest, and also like I said the worst thing, I don't know, being lost at sea, having your husband try to murder you, it's all pretty bad.
The worst thing so far has been her life.
Right. But there was one time that she was out delivering and or selling cosmetics door to door. Like, I just picture, Mary Kay type deal, which it's pretty bad to begin with. That's not a job
that's the most unlucky thing.
Right. But as she was walking, a child exclaimed, "Weird bird!" And before she knew what was happening, a bat landed in her hair and dug its claws into her scalp. So,
and then carried her away.
Her off. It was her prince. Saved her from her.
Fucking Christ.
Yeah. So of course she was terrified, and she began running door to door looking for somebody to help her. Instead, the people who answered the door would see what was happening and just scream things like, "There's a motherfucking bat in your motherfucking hair." At least that's what I presume they were screaming. Like,
get that motherfucking bat out.
I don't know. Yeah. So she's looking for help, finding people that are just like screaming in her face about this bat. That, like, I don't get that, because the bat's in her hair, not theirs.
Yeah.
But all the screaming frightened the bat, which caused it to dig its claws in deeper and also piss all over her head.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Right.
You can't tell me that, like, the Grim Reaper isn't, like, desperate at this point.
It's like, screw it, I'll get her through infection or something. I don't know. Just fucking send a bat.
Dracula, could you do something, please?
So eventually, as she's like frantically looking for somebody to help and they just keep screaming, I see, now I'm thinking about it. They just said that they kept screaming. I wonder if they were screaming like, ah, there's a bat, or if they were screaming at her like, crazy bat lady, get off my lawn. Like, maybe they thought that was her pet bat, and they just thought whatever. But eventually a neighbor who like knew her happened to return home from the grocery store, and when she saw what was going on, she did what any good friend would do. She didn't think
anything of it and went into her home.
How's your day going? Well, I've got this bat ripping my scalp off. Oh, well, yeah, the lemons were on sale yesterday, but now I get them today and they're not. So we're both having bad days.
It sure is a hot one. I'll see you later.
But no, this person knew her, so she did what any good friend would do and tossed her car keys and made Jeanne drive herself basically anywhere but there. Like, here's a fucking car, get out of here.
Holy shit. Like, just grab a fucking broom and hit it. Like,
you'd think it's a
goddamn bat. Like, they're fucking creepy and weird, but like,
but they're not that creepy. There's 1,000 creepier.
Right. Like, she wasn't like half swallowed by an alligator. Like,
right. And there's very little chance if you start whapping at the thing with a broom that it's going to come attack you. And if it does, you have a broom now. Just keep attacking it. Like,
I think what's really unlucky is she ended up in a town full of fucking wimps. Can't deal with a goddamn bat.
So anyway, now that she had a car and a bat in her head, she drove to a vet, which was... It seems weird, but it's probably smarter than driving to the flamethrower store like I would have done.
Well, and a doctor would have just put her down. Like,
that's what I said too. Like, it's better than like having a ER doctor just like frantically slashing at the bat with a scalpel.
Well, there's nothing we can do. We can only make this as comfortable as possible for you.
Give her some morphine until she dies. What? It's just a bat.
It's just a bat. It's a part of you now.
So there's that, and the vet was able to take care of the situation, and she did not die of bat piss infection, so that's good, I guess.
Yeah, you did it.
So that was really the worst thing, but there was one more thing that literally every article I found on her mentioned that was not really bad luck, but it's something that has to be mentioned. They all did, and I'm going to too. Apparently one day Jeanne was at the local pool swimming when the name Rogers was called to come to the front desk. Given that her name was Jeanne Rogers, she assumed the call was for her. There was a fellow swimmer, though, one Fred Rogers, and yes, it was that Fred Rogers, also heard the call and assumed it was for him, which somehow, though it was like never made clear, led to them both like trying to hurriedly exit the pool. It must have been like, oh, there's emergency at the front desk or something like that, but they were both trying to like hurry to get out of the pool to go up to the front desk. And during the, I guess, confusion that comes with exiting a public pool, like
they got shot.
I didn't know that was a thing. Right. Now, Jeanne inadvertently like reached up and grabbed the string on Fred's bathing suit, which loosened the trunks, and basically she pantsed him in front of everybody. So Jeanne accidentally showed the world Mr. Fred Rogers. Mr. McFeely is what I assume that he calls his junk. But, so that's not really bad luck, but
that's actually great luck for all of us.
Right. Mr. Rogers is like such the wholesome character, like everything I've ever heard about the guy, like not just his show, but even off the show, like he was the Mother Teresa of kids television.
He just would have been like, oh, shucks, if you wanted to see it.
Oh, I didn't even put the sweater on it this morning. Darn it.
Well, let's not front. There was always a sweater on it. Mr. Rogers knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
That's actually a really wow. Fuck, we're shitting on this great guy's memory, but I'm just thinking that's like the lost episode when he's like opening up his fucking closet and there's a bunch of little sweaters underneath his big sweaters. What are those for? Oh, they're for, private time. It's good to have private time, kids.
Little Fred.
You can play dress up with all sorts of things.
Anybody want to see a puppet show? No, God, no.
Oh, man. Mr. Rogers was such a great guy, and I'm such a knot.
We're both going to get struck by lightning now, and then we can do a show on ourselves.
Yeah, it's the price of fame, Fred. This is This is what happens. Two dipshits completely shit on your beloved memory because we have nothing going on a Thursday.
Hey, blame Jeannie. She's the one that pulled his trunks off. See, again, most of these stories, like, they're verified across multiple different accounts, like even like interviews and stuff. It wasn't, a lot of the times it's like, oh, crack.com has this thing, but these stories were all very, they're the same across all these different accounts. And the most recent interview I found with her was in like 2007, but the interviewer even mentioned how like she's still like a very happy-go-lucky person in great spirits. I'm like, how?
Because you've been zapped so much, like just shut off that fucking miserable part of your brain.
Yeah, but yeah,
because she fucking defeated death in that chess game we're all playing called life.
Last week I was just like getting a kick out of picturing all these people like chasing that monster and then setting it on fire and then being like, oh fuck, now we've got an on fire monster. Now like this week I got to just like, as I was writing this the whole time, I'm just picturing this woman running around suburbia with like a bat ripping her face off and everybody being just like, oh my god, there's a bat, and it's like, yes, that's my problem, help me.
And
like,
nobody with a fucking garden rake, but everybody outside for some reason, like nobody having any way to help her. Like, just spray her with a hose. I guarantee you the bat will fucking fly away.
It's like getting shot and coming up to somebody like, help, I've been shot, and they go, oh my god, you've been shot. It's like, yeah,
don't get blood on my lawn.
I guess I could see that's what would happen to me. I'd suffer horrific injury, and every person I go to for help would just like pass out at the sight of the blood, and you're like, fuck.
To be fair, like we say, like, why didn't anyone help her? If I saw somebody running outside with a bat attached to their head, I would probably just like kind of nod and then shut my blinds. And
that's true, because we've talked about,
how many people would go out to help?
I barely open my door when people come. Like, I sit here and like think, how obvious is it that somebody's home right now?
Yeah.
Oh fuck, I better go answer it.
I would like to think if I was outside already, though, I wouldn't just go and run away from her. But at the same time, I haven't been that helpful historically when like somebody's been hurt, and like I've tried, but I don't really know what to do. Like one time I was when I was in college, it was the morning, and me and this girl just got off the bus, and she like slipped on a patch of ice, and I think she broke her arm actually from this fall. And she was just, it was that fucking awkward, like, I'm the only one here and I don't know what to do for you. Like, obviously, like, other people showed up like right away and they got her medical attention and shit. But I was just like, okay, you focus on breathing and try to ignore.
Don't fall asleep. I think I've heard that before.
Try to ignore the fact that your arm just probably shattered.
Quick, what's the date? It's like, it's my arm, you asshole. It's like, I know, but what?
Can you you start going into like every fucking dumb idea you possibly have in your head, where it's like, well, could you just try to do the alphabet backwards? And it's like, I have no idea how to help you, actually. Like,
walk it off.
And then the most I did, the most helpful thing I did for this poor girl was just like make sure nobody opened the door that would have hit her in the head. Well, I was just like, try not to use the store. No, dude, go around.
That's pretty helpful though, because that could have finished her off.
Yeah, I felt like such a piece of shit, because it's like, man, I'm useless in an emergency.
I've been fortunate enough to not really be tested. We did witness a really bad car accident, but the people that took the brunt of it, like, other people were closer and they got to that car first, and I got to the second car, and that guy was in shock, but he was okay. Like, he wasn't hurt.
Yeah.
But
you didn't do the Sopranos thing where you run up, open the car door, and just start fucking choking him. Where's my money, you piece of shit?
Piece of shit. And I don't know if it helped or hurt my reactions in that situation, but I had like been coming back from the bar. No, I wasn't driving because I'm not dumb. But it was football season. We had watched an Ohio State game at the bar, and so I'd had a couple drinks. I wasn't like slurring drunk, but enough.
But you were ready to start slurring,
right?
If it came to it.
Which made giving the witness statement to the police officer afterwards interesting.
Well, fucking goddamn Ohio game, man. Am I right? Could you just focus on the accident, sir?
So what happened? Well, let me turn away from you so I'm not breathing in your direction and tell you.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I was born a Browns fan, and it sucked.
Yeah, so trying to get home, and these fuckers had an accident, and now I'm sobering up. I'm going to have to drink more now.
No, the last thing I want to do is drink and then talk to the cops. I don't care if I'm blameless.
There's been a surprising number of times in my life that I've had to do that, though.
So you're good at it?
Yeah.
That's good.
I guess.
I'm not good at it.
As good as you... You always think you're good at it, but you know you really weren't. Like
any conversation I've had with cops sober, like you would think I was... You wouldn't think I was drunk. You would think I was like trying to hide like hallucinogens or something.
There's a body in the trunk.
The way I avoid eye contact and I just mumble and like cops just don't like me, and I'm so uncomfortable around them, and they can pick up on that. But they don't. But they think it's because I'm like hiding shit, and it's like, no, I'm just. You have a gun.
It's awkward,
and that makes me scared.
Yeah.
Just naturally.
So, but that has nothing to do with Genie or pirates.
Yeah. Well, you know, we had to pad it out a little bit.
We did. I knew mine was going to be short, but when I came across it, I was like, I want to talk about this woman because, like, I always say that I have nothing but bad luck, but like at least I have like it's a string of like boring bad luck. It's like, oh, my shoelaces broke on the way to work.
She was definitely a force of nature. If she like managed to make Mr. Rogers unwholesome for like a minute
at a public pool that's surrounded by children that are all eyes on Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, and he's just like, God damn it. Lady, are you serious? You're ruining this for me. Why'd you just grab anything and pull? Like, that's not how you get out of a pool.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't get how they're like, oh, she accidentally like grabbed this cord. It's like, what? As opposed to the cord that you grab when you're trying to get out of a pool? Like, you...
Yeah, that's a great story. I love somebody who just like life throws like every extreme piece of shit it can at them, and like they somehow like just end like it ends up with like you just have a bunch of stories.
Yep.
And it really didn't change who you are. Like you're still a good person, and
that's the most like amazing part because I wouldn't be. Somebody'd come in at work and be like, oh, I'm sorry, it's last minute. I know you're closing in 2 minutes, but I'm like, I had a fucking bat in my hair 20 years ago. Get the fuck out.
Like, I burn a burger, and I'm like, I fucking hate the world. I want to die.
Right.
You're like, and these people are like, I survived the Titanic, and like,
can you believe it?
Can you believe it? Isn't life beautiful? And I'm like, you shut up. No, it's not. Look at this burger.
Now, as far as I could tell, like I said, she's still alive, so there might be like a grand finale to this. Let's hope not. Like she's paid her dues. Like long happy life, but we don't know. There might be a part 2 to this episode.
Somebody just hands her a whip, and then the Grim Reaper shows up for the final showdown.
Shit, so far, given what's happened, I'm putting my money on her.
Yeah, that's like, all right. We'll count to 3 and then we'll go. 1, 2, 3, and then go. Not 1, 2, 3. Like he's just real nervous.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so that's all I've got. But
yeah, that was good shit. Good shit. Another week of good shit. Top tier shit. Non-essential shit.
Top drawer, fellow person.
Send us your photos of non-essential shit.
No, please send Ben your photos. I don't want to deal with that mess. Anytime you ask for photos on the internet, it goes horribly wrong. We need to engage with
social media more, Steve. Like, we need this.
Have you had a bad day where you felt unlucky? Please tell us about it.
Send us the contents of your toilet every week. Yeah, that's the Non-Essential Podcast this week.
Yep.
We'll be back next week, same time.
Thanks.
With 2 more things.
Thanks for listening. I'm going to talk right over top of you and say my piece.
All right. I thought we were friends. Thought we were coworkers, but I guess there's no respect.